welcome to this week's Hearts Wide Open. My guest today is a musician, he's a sportsman, and he's a man who found the miraculous power of God in his life when he was diagnosed with a tumour aged just 16. He believes as a result that you should live life out loud, and we thought we'd let him come and tell his story, not least because I'm incredibly jealous, because Dave Bell has played with Little Richard. Welcome. That must have been an amazing experience. Incredible experience, yeah. It was at a big charity event for the Make-A-Wish Foundation in London, and the band that I was playing in at the time got asked to open the night up for Little Richard. Yes. Incredible. He brought a very excessive 14-piece band with him. He had 2 drummers on stage, 2 bass players, 4 electric guitarists, and we had the opportunity to open the night. And what was interesting is I was starting to share a little bit of my story as I was allowed to do that. And Gene Simmons from the band Kiss was on the front row, wow, listening to me sharing my story, and just a phenomenal night. And knowing you as I do, and knowing the way that you share your story, I don't imagine you would have been pulling any punches about the power of God for you as an individual. No, absolutely. I just shared it as it was. And what was incredible was I had a great reaction. You know, people were clapping, and I did it as if I was in a church. Yeah. You see, we would kind of assume, I suppose, that an audience like that, although, I mean, Little Richard has dipped his toe in the church water over the years, hasn't he? But you would kind of imagine an audience like that, they're there for the music, they're not really interested in a talky bit, that they wouldn't respond well. It's amazing how open people actually are to the truth about God when that power is evident in front of them. Absolutely, and that's the power of a personal testimony, you know, nobody could really argue with it. So when we're given the opportunity to tell our stories, it can actually have a profound effect. Right. So you've put together your story. I mean, this story that you got to share that now, you've put it together and drawn some important things out in a book, and I'd like us to explore some of those ideas, but I would also like us to explore your story. The beginning of your book, which is called How to Live Life Out Loud. Yes. It starts by introducing Dave Bell to us. So go on, tell us a bit about you. So I need to paint the picture, really, that I'm a relatively, I use that term, like relatively normal boy. Nothing special about me, but I paint the picture by giving you a little bit of a background to my life. So, in the very blessed and privileged position to be born into a Christian household. Not only that, but my parents are actually senior pastors of the church that I go to. Wonderful relationship, really, with my family. Had an older brother who's 13 years older than me, an older sister who's 10 years older than me. So when I did ask my parents the question, they assured me that I was planned. Okay. Just to clear that up. And that's reassuring for you. Very reassuring. Yeah. Overall, I was very content with life, and I suppose, like most young boys, I thought I was invincible, and from an early age I'd dress up in my Superman outfit and jump off this really high garden wall with my mum probably staring in the background, worried about me. But, you know, you live life to the fullest, and I suppose, like most boys, I thought, you know, what bad could possibly happen to me? Where did the music come from? Well, my dad apparently was a successful musician back in the day. Right. He was in a band called The Advocates. Is this really a successful musician? Well, he said he was a Christian rock star. I think the only bit of truth is he was a Christian. Right. I think my musical influences were passed down from them. And I remember my granddad actually gave me my first guitar, and it appeared to be crafted before the wheel, but it still did the job. And the defining moment came when I was watching the blockbuster hit Back to the Future, and it's the part where he plays Johnny Be Good. And I thought, you know, I cannot rest until I can play Johnny Be Good. And from an early age, I would sit down at night time just with my guitar watching Eric Clapton DVDs, and music was a huge passion throughout my it was a passion that got directed in the right direction as well, because as a Christian, growing up in the church, I mean, your faith was a very active, a very real thing. Of course. And part of bands developing your skills, but wanting to use it for God, and wanted to... that was the direction you wanted to go in, wasn't it? Absolutely, and my parents did a wonderful job in imparting into me
the importance of church, the importance of going to church on a Sunday. And I suppose it came to that decision time when, because I loved sport, it was either to play football on a Sunday morning or go to church.
Yeah.
And I believe that even though I couldn't see it probably at times, how important going to church was. And it was so amazing because God actually lined up a team that actually played all of its matches on a Sunday afternoon, so church was never compromised. But I was involved in the worship in my church, you know, from a young age, from just playing in the kids group and then, you know, eventually to like leading worship and things like that.
So in many ways, I suppose your life was what many Christian parents would hope for their children. That you have grown, you've grown up in church, you've grown up in faith, you've grown into your teens, you're active in church, you want to be involved in church, because an awful lot of teenagers, of course, start to drift away from church.
Yeah.
And then you hit 16, and suddenly, well, I imagine the bottom fell out your family's world, really.
Yeah, so up until that time, I think we describe it in the book that, you know, as a family, our life was really kissed by grace. The church was doing really well, and, you know, life just seemed to be going great. And we noticed that a chapter in our life started to turn. It started with the ill health of my mum, who had some really major spinal surgery, and due to a few complications then had 7 further surgeries to rectify a few problems, and left her, you know, quite weak and frail. Also, my grandparents, a bit of an untimely death, and we believe that died a little sooner than really what they should have done. And we thought we were just coming towards the end of that, but little did we know that storm clouds were actually beginning to gather, and really our biggest challenge was still ahead of us.
Yeah, you sort of thought that maybe the storm, this was the storm, worst of it was past, but actually it was just the opening blast of the gale.
Yeah, and little did we know that the problem would be to do with me.
Yeah. So how did you find out you had this problem, this tumour?
So it was early 2003. Woke up one morning and did my usual routine, went through to the bathroom, looked into the mirror and saw there was a problem with my right eye. So we went to the doctors, and he dismissed it at first, thinking it might be a minor infection, and sent me on my way. The problem progressed and my eye became very swollen, very sore, and looked completely different to my other eye. So we went to the hospital in Lincoln, and the specialist looked into my eye and then kind of sat back from the desk and said, "There's something going on behind your eye that I'm a little concerned about. And actually, as a hospital, we're not really qualified to take you on any further. I'm going to have to send you to one of the specialists, one of the top ophthalmologists in the country, and he'll look after you from here."
Oh dear.
So we got in the car and we did the 50-mile journey from Lincoln to Leicester, and I waited in the registrar's room, and she came through and had a look at me and left the room immediately without saying anything. So I looked at my mum and dad. I said, "I don't think that's a good sign."
No.
She then brings the leading guy through, the main man, and he has a look into the back of my eye and says, "Dave, there's something here that I'm really concerned about. And as a matter of urgency, we're going to get you back in within 48 hours and we'll perform a biopsy on your right eye and we'll have a look at what's going on here."
That must have been a bit of a hiccup moment for you, because I would imagine, I mean, your mum and dad, they're Christians, they're church leaders, you're a Christian, you're walking with God. I would imagine that journey from Lincoln to Leicester had a bit of praying in it.
Of course, absolutely. I had a bit of praying, a bit of me wondering what was going to happen, a few questions thrown out here and there, a lot of worry.
So when the consultant said to you, "I think there's something we should be a bit concerned about," did you kind of get that sort of faith jitter that a lot of Christians get when they face a difficult situation?
I think I was maybe still in a little bit of a bubble, in that it really didn't have a major effect on me that day, because I just still assumed it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
You know, I assumed that I'd have a course of antibiotics and my eye would return to normal. But we got back in the car, and then 2 days later we came back in for the biopsy. And it was on that drive on the way there, which I believe 2nd or 3rd chapter in my book is when I've learnt my first lesson on what was going to be a very, very long journey. And it's this little phrase that the words we speak can actually frame the world we live in.
Right.
So I was in the car, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm a 16-year-old boy and I'm a bit confused, and I said, you know what, Mum and Dad, I bet when we get there I'm going to be on a ward where the average age is 170. I'm going to be this young guy, and my bed's going to be right in the middle of two guys who look like they're clinically on their way out. And we laughed a little bit. We open the doors, we get into the ward, and the nurse says, here is your bed, Mr. Bell. It was on a ward where the average age was literally 190. And my bed was right bang in the middle of two really old guys. And I said to Dad, what's going on? And he said, you know what, Dave, the Bible says there's power of life and death in the tongue, and we need to say what we want to see. And the words we speak can actually frame the world that we live in.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll say what I want to see. I'm a young guy, I'm a little bit nervous. I want you and Mum to stay with me tonight. Now, we didn't have private healthcare, so we know that that was a little far-fetched for the NHS. But I went over and I said to the nurse, I want my Mum and Dad to stay with me tonight. She opened this door, and there was a brand new part of the ward that hadn't even been opened yet, with 3 brand new beds. And she said, Dave, you and your family can stay here tonight.
That's brilliant.
The words we speak frame the world that we live in. The next morning, the consultant came and he arrived, and the little difference, the difference about that morning was he wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing surgical attire, and he had a team behind him, and they actually took a lot of pictures of me that asked for my permission whether they could be used in medical studies for the future because of the rare nature of what was going on. We then went through to the anaesthetic room, and I laid in a bed, and my mum came with me. And there was another profound moment where you have all of these guys who are the top of their field, surgeons, anaesthetists, and she said, would it be okay if we all pray now? So, hold it together. So I laid there and held my mum's hand, and she said a very, very simple prayer. Father God, be with Dave in this operation, and pray that your will be done. And I looked around the room, and I couldn't see anything out of my eye by this time, and everybody had their head bowed, and very, very special moment.
Yeah.
I had the operation, and during my time in the recovery room, my family got the call.
And it wasn't good news, was it? Far from
No,
it.
they were taken into a side room out of the way of anybody else, and they were told that I'd contracted a very rare and aggressive disease. And at this stage, the prognosis is uncertain. It could be something as simple as losing my right eye, maybe some reconstruction to the right-hand side of my face. But due to the aggressive nature of what they've seen, my family were prepared that my life may be cut short at the age of 16.
That must have been an awful moment for your mum and dad. Because there they are, as I say, having given their lives to serving God, working, leading his church, and suddenly to be confronted with that. I mean, looking back now, have they told you how they felt at the time?
Yeah, I hear the stories of the thoughts and the words that were maybe shared in those moments, and I'm ever so proud of them, because obviously Dad being a minister, you have to deal with life and death as part of the job, but when it's your own son, it's a little bit different. But when I woke up from the operation, this will give you an example of how my dad dealt with it. My dad's face was the first person I saw staring at me, and being a young guy, I said, Dad, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? What have they seen? What have they found? What have they said? And he looked at me and he said, Dave, the doctors have reported some stuff back to us that is really not good. But as a family, from this day forward, from this moment on, we're going to choose to fight this thing with everything that we have. And we're also still going to believe that Jesus Christ is still in the business of healing 2,000 years on. I then entered what I describe as the darkest week of my life, waiting for the results, not knowing the certainty or the outcome of my future, not knowing what was around the corner. 7 days' time, I came down the stairs ready to get in the car to go on the journey again, and there was another profound moment on my journey. My dad was at the front door waiting for me, and he was wearing his suit. And I looked at I thought, that's a bit odd. So I said, Dad, what, are you going somewhere after? Have you got a meeting? He said, no. I said, why are you wearing a suit? And he said, you know what, Dave? I've decided that we're going to face this thing seriously. And you know what? We may go to the hospital today and receive some news that may be devastating and change the course of our lives forever. But when you hear that news, you can't be dressed scruffy. You've got to take this seriously. And it was just a sign that they were kind of carrying me at this stage through the process, taking it very, very seriously. And the little symbol of my dad putting on his suit to hear the news was pretty special to me.
If this was a Christian film, we would now reach the place where the news was good and there was a miraculous healing and Shazam, all was well. Yeah. But that wasn't the reality for you, was it? I mean, we've actually got some pictures of you while you're having your treatment. Chemotherapy, radiotherapy, horrendous situation.
Yeah.
And it really did mess with your body. Did you worry that you weren't going to come through this?
Yeah, absolutely. When God created us, he created us with a mind, and your mind is a very powerful thing when you let it wander. I had some very strong anti-sickness drugs that used to make me have some pretty horrendous nightmares. I would see family photos and kind of have an image of myself erased from them. I would...
Back to the Future again, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so, exactly, yeah, that's... If I said I didn't worry, it'd be lying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went into the hospital and had 6 months of intense chemotherapy.
And they gave you, because in the book you list a whole load of things that they told you might happen.
Yeah.
And to be honest, reading that list, the stuff that could happen because of the chemotherapy, the stuff that could happen because of the radiotherapy, in some ways the list of things that could go wrong because of the treatment almost seemed worse than the list of things that could happen because of the tumour.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about being here with you today is that the first morning of my chemotherapy, we opened the famous UCB reading notes for the day. And I said to my mum and dad, I said, can we just not run away from this? Can we just not get in the car and just pray a bit harder? You know, look at what I've got to do.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
I've got 6 months, possibly a year of treatment, and the story was the story of Naaman. And it talks about, obviously, that he was dipped 7 times in the muddy waters of the River Jordan. And there's a little line in there that said he would have chosen any other river. And at that stage in my journey, I would have chosen any other route. I would have loved to have packed the bags, got in the car and just prayed a bit harder. But you know what? That journey wasn't for me. But I had to go through the muddy waters of the River Jordan to experience healing. How
long did it take from the start to the time when you could actually say, that's it, I am cured?
So I noticed problems in the early stages of 2003. Started the treatment May, June time. Treatment went all the way through 6 months of chemotherapy. I'd lay in a bed for 3 days while toxic poison was put through my body into a tube in my heart. And then had 25 days of intense radiotherapy, had a mass made of my face, clamped to a table, unable to move. And I finished my treatment about 3 days before Christmas Day.
Nice Christmas present.
Best Christmas present ever.
Yeah. When you were 16 and they told you that this was going to happen, they gave you that list of stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff that was on it was that you would be disfigured effectively. Yeah. A lot of it was that there would be all sorts of internal problems of potential. And of course, there was also the statement that as a consequence of the treatment, you might never have children.
Yeah.
As a teenager, I would imagine the idea that you would be turned from the good-looking fella that you obviously are...
You're very kind.
...into somebody who was disfigured, and the potential of not getting a girlfriend, not getting married, not having kids.
Yeah.
Was that something that really hit you?
Yeah, absolutely. The list of facts that I received were absolutely endless, and if people ask me a little bit of how I dealt with this, this is how I would sum it up. That in life we're given what's known as the facts. The facts are what we see in the natural. But what we have to do and have to learn very quickly is we don't deny the facts. We don't pretend they don't exist. We don't avoid medical advice. We don't not take the medication because we may feel it to be a lack of faith, all of that. What we don't do is we don't embrace the facts because there's something higher than the facts. That's the truth. The facts are the natural, the truth is the supernatural. So if I can sum it up this way, the facts said that Dave Bell was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness that attempted to silence. But the truth is Jesus Christ hung on a cross 2,000 years ago so that I could live my life out loud. The facts always have to be submissive to the truth. So I saw these facts as a big list, and I believed that God would come through on every single one for me and I'd see a tick. So they said that I'd never have a right eyebrow or right eyelash again. There's something higher than that. That's the truth. The truth is it has returned. The facts said I'd have damage to my pituitary gland, need growth hormone tablets every day of my life. But there's something higher than the facts. That's the truth, and the truth is when God designed my body, he designed it to grow. The facts said I'd have damage to the right-hand side of my face, may never look the same again. But the truth is, when God designed my body, he designed it to look the way he intended it to look. And there was still a few facts on the sheet that remained unticked. So when I came out of the hospital, Christmas time, the road to recovery, I thought, you know, am I ever going to be able to drive? Would I get a job when I'm older? Would I get married? And I suppose I thought, with all of these titles that were over my life, could somebody really love me with all of that baggage that's attached? And that was a fact. I didn't deny it, but I certainly didn't embrace it. I embraced the truth. And
the truth was fulfilled, wasn't it? Because you met Sarah.
The truth is, on the 4th of August, 2007, I stood at the front of a church waiting for the most beautiful, amazing, gorgeous bride to come in. And as you'll see, and I know I've married completely out of my league. I appreciate that.
And the thing is, the nurses from the ward, they were there with you guys, weren't they?
As you'll see on the next photo, the ladies that are stood by me on my wedding day were the same ladies that were stood by my bedside when I was pretty much unable to move, caring for me.
But when you asked Sarah to marry you, I mean, most blokes, I suppose for you, one of the convenient things was you already had the band for the reception.
Exactly.
Yes, guys, mates, rates, please. But when you asked Sarah to marry you, because one thing that most couples don't have to stop and think about at that point is whether or not they'll be able to have children.
Sure.
You had to talk to her about that.
Yes.
And she's a midwife.
Yeah.
That must have been tough.
God has a sense of humour. So I chatted with Sarah. I said, Sarah, if you choose to marry me, you need to know there's a couple of facts we need to think about. And I said, the doctors have told me that we may never be able to have children naturally, and when the woman you'd love to marry is a qualified midwife that delivers babies every day of the week and sees new life being born and has actually a fond love of children, that's such a difficult conversation to have. But what's amazing about this story is when I went through my treatment, I used to wear a certain T-shirt. There was nothing really special about the T-shirt. I got it at a Christian conference and it had my name on the back of it, so that made it special. And I chose that this would be the T-shirt that would come through the journey with me. We had prayer teams at church pray over the T-shirt. So when I would go into a hospital on a Wednesday, the T-shirt would go on, I'd get connected up to my drips and it would stay with me. And when I got married and we moved into our new married home, the T-shirt came with us. It went in a drawer, out of the way, not so I could be reminded of the horrendous things, but I could be reminded of God's goodness. But there was one day in 2009 when I had to go back to the T-shirt drawer again. I got the T-shirt out of the drawer, we put it in a bag, got in the car, and we went to hospital. Very familiar to what I'm used to doing. We then went into a hospital room, once again, a place I'm very familiar with. The bag was placed on the bed and I unzipped it, and the difference about this day was when I pulled the T-shirt out, it wasn't me that had to wear it. I passed it to my wife, she put it on, and within a couple of hours, she gave birth to our miracle baby boy, Jackson.
Brilliant.
And I think the picture that you're looking at now is Jackson, a few months old, being held by one of the nurses at Ward 27.
Where you had your treatment?
Where I'd had my treatment, yeah.
That must have been an awesome moment.
Yeah, incredible. You know, words won't do it justice.
When you went back that day, because I know your mum and dad went with you,
Yeah.
and Sarah went with you with Jackson,
Yeah.
and you walked onto that ward, in some ways, every box that they had said was a risk had been scored out by God.
Yeah.
You were fully recovered.
Yeah.
No lasting impact upon you as physically.
No.
And there was a child.
Yeah.
How did those people respond?
It was an amazing experience. I took Jackson on the ward a little bit later on when he was a bit older, and we got in that familiar lift, and some of the times I've been in that lift, I had to tip my head right back just to see anything and wore sunglasses because my face looked so terrible to look at. He pushed the button for me. We got out, we went onto the world of Ward 27, and I knocked on my consultant's door, and Jackson was in my right arm, and when the consultant opened the door, I think he was pretty taken back. For me to be in the way I am is pretty unheard of, but for me to be holding a perfectly healthy baby boy in my right arm was something he'd not yet seen in his career. And as a family, we face the facts, but we're so, so thankful that there's something higher, and that's the truth.
And of course now Jackson has a little brother as well.
Jackson has a little brother. We went to the T-shirt drawer again. The T-shirt came out and Levi was born.
You've written this book about living life out loud.
Yeah.
And it comes out of your experience. And some people might think, oh, this is obviously about you've had this risk, you've now got to grasp every moment and live it to the max. But actually, I suspect there's a more subtle message.
Yes.
What is the message that you have learned from your experience and the message you would want people who are walking through dark paths themselves to grasp?
First of all, we need to get our perspective right from the outset. Whatever you're going through is not God's idea. God didn't do that. But somehow, through all of this, I read, whilst I was in the hospital, it's John chapter 9, the man who was born blind. They say, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? He says, well, neither, but this has happened so that the work of God may be displayed in his life. So as long as you get your perspective right from the start, this is not God's intention, not his punishment, but somehow he was going to allow this to happen so that his work may be glorified, even though you can't see it just yet. And the concept of living life out loud is just making the very best of the rest of your life. This isn't the dress rehearsal. We only get one chance at it. And when I'm in old age and I'm looking back on my life and in moments of my final breath, I never want the thought, if only, to come to my mind. If only I'd taken a few more risks. If only I'd told that family member that I loved them. If only I'd not played my life so safe and maybe lived it a little louder. If